Ma'ariv is approximately 7:15. Okay, since we're through with Yontif, and we're at a time where the Rebbe spoke so strongly about the mitzvah of Tefillin, that by us putting on Tefillin and by us encouraging others, particularly with the mitzvah of Tefillin, it says that this is a mitzvah that brings chusim, particularly during a war. The Torah of Zeraya Afkot, that when a person himself puts on Tefillin, and since Klal Yisrael are all one, Kol Yisrael Arevim Zeh Bazeh, we're all responsible for one another. So every time somebody puts on Tefillin, it strengthens the ability of us to be able to overcome the enemy. So the Rebbe during the 6-day war, that's when the Rebbe started the whole mitzvah of Tefillin, that everybody should do what they can to see to it that you put on Tefillin with Yidden, you strengthen yourself, the mitzvah, do it with more Hidur, and so on. So we're going to start learning halachis of, specifically halachis of Hanochas Tefillin. So, Godel Schara Shel Mitzvahs Tefillin. We're talking about the tremendous schar. You need to keep it. So. Oh, I thought you wanted to fix it. Godel Schar Mitzvahs Tefillin. We're talking about the great reward for putting on tefillin. And kol mi she'ena manichon, if somebody chas v'sholom does not put on tefillin, harei b'chlal poishe Yisrael begufim. The Gemara says a person that doesn't put on tefillin is considered as somebody that goes against Torah and mitzvahs begufim, with his physical body. Instead of putting on tefillin with his physical body, he refuses to, and obviously the key is refuses to, because certainly in today's day and age, many of the people, the majority of people that don't put on tefillin, it's, as the Rebbe said many times, it's as a tinuk shenishpa, as somebody who just grew up in an environment who doesn't know the importance of tefillin, may not even know what tefillin are all about. I mean, often today we meet people that doesn't happen often, but it happens. It happens with many people. That you tell them about film, they don't begin to understand what you're talking about. This is the first time they may have seen it or certainly heard about it.
The sin showing that is something deliberately done.
Correct.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's why I'm emphasizing that point. Correct. Even if somebody says, when you put on tefillin, there are specific rules and regulations as to being able to be sure with yourself that you have a cleansed body, particularly physically, and even from the perspective of spiritually, the kinds of things that you think about when you're wearing the tefillin. And he says, I don't want to put on tefillin because I might not be as holy as I need to while I put on tefillin. And as we know, when the Rebbe started Niftzah Tefillin, there were so many people out there saying, how could the Rebbe be telling people to put on tefillin with people in the street? Who knows what they're thinking about when they... But the Rebbe's perspective was, who knows what you're thinking about? The point being, we have to do the best we can. And perhaps, and especially a person that's putting on tefillin for the first time, it's such a new experience for him that at that point, that person is probably more into his putting on tefillin than most people who put it on regularly. But the idea being, obviously, go back to the situation where you don't know what the holiness needs to be or what it involves and so on. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about somebody who clearly knows what it's all about and refuses to do it. So even if he knows and he gives the excuse, I'm not going to put it on because I'm not pure enough. Obviously not permitted to do that. So b'shas kriya shema v'tfilah, because during that time, al kapanim b'kalos yachol lihizayin, because during that period of time, certainly you could be careful. And, all that we're talking about is a specific period of time, because for a person like that, at least put it on, make the bracha and say the Shema. So no excuses for it. Yeah.
What can I do? You put on tefillin, with no prayers, put them on, and then just take them off. And do you get any merit from that?
We'll get to that soon, and the answer is yes. Yeah. V'shanu chachamim, and the chachamim, the Gemara tells us in Iyu Zakoin b'mitzvahs tefillin kav suchos machras, that if a person has only that mitzvah of tefillin, so for that alone, you know that the schusim, the merits will outweigh the demerits. Just the mitzvah tefillin in itself, because because mitzvah tefillin, the mitzvah of tefillin is one of the greatest mitzvahs. Because the entire Torah is compared to this one mitzvah of tefillin. Shenemar, as the pasuk says regarding tefillin, "L'man tia teiras Hashem beficha." It says, if you should put on tefillin so that the Torah should be something that's in your mouth. In other words, put on tefillin, and it's as if you have the whole Torah as a result of that, indicating how important and how precious putting on tefillin is, whether or not you can have the right intentions and so on. Well, because Torah is something that goes into your mind. You learn Torah. Torah is Hashem beficha. Torah is not just what you think about; it's what saying the words of Torah. So when it comes to mitzvahs, to the limud of Torah, it's Torah is Hashem beficha. And we're also taught that a person, everybody should be especially careful with the mitzvah of tefillin. And we're also told that a reward for tefillin is arichas yamim, longevity. So, and again, particularly, as the Rebbe pointed out, the way the Gemara tells us that as a result of putting on tefillin, we're able to overcome our enemies. So, especially during a time of war, the Rebbe said back then, during the 6-Day War, the Rebbe said, we all want to do something on behalf of the soldiers, and we can't be fighting the war for them. They're there fighting the war. But what we can do is, since the mitzvah of tefillin is something that protects us specifically during a war, and since all of Klal Yisrael are connected with one another, so if we put on tefillin here, it adds one more person to that will protect the entire Klal Yisrael. It's interesting. The Rebbe said also a very interesting thing. There are, I forget the exact number, 300,000, 800 and whatever, a certain amount of letters in the Torah. 304,805. That's how many letters there are in the Torah. So the Rebbe used the expression that when we unite ourselves through Torah, what happens is when the enemy sees one soldier, imagine, this way the enemy is seeing one soldier. When we're united through Torah with Klal Yisrael, the enemy is seeing 305,805 people. It's not just one person. That's what that creates. So imagine as the Rebbe used the expression, that the enemy will run away. How could he possibly deal with that many people against one person? So again, the point of it is that we have to recognize that the spiritual perspective of what Torah and mitzvahs are all about, we look at it as a physical item. You put on tefillin, you're putting on something physical. But what we accomplish is, in addition to the physical, which is what we need to do, we have to put on the tefillin, but that creates a special spiritual bond between one and another and our bond with Hashem. in a very literal sense. I mean, you see, in a very literal sense, because that's one of the things that Rebbe taught us, that we should stop thinking about mitzvahs just as something physical. We should be realistic, and sometimes we tell people, put a mezuzah on your door, that'll protect you. And they say, okay, I'll put the mezuzah on my door, it's going to protect me, okay, whatever, The Rebbe would teach us that when the Torah says that this will protect you, this is very literal, to the extent that the Rebbe would say often to people that would come to the Rebbe with particular issues, and the Rebbe would say, make sure that you have mezuzahs on your doors. And there's so many stories that we know happened, where the Rebbe told the person, make sure to put the mezuzah on the door, and they put the mezuzah on the door, and whatever the issue was, went away. In other words, it's not just something spiritual that we can't relate to, or something that sounds really nice, glorifying. You'll have a mezuzah and you'll be protected. It's a reality. We have to live with it as a reality and do what it takes. And particularly with a mezuzah, and even with tefillin, the Torah tells us, yes, you could put the mezuzah on the door to protect you. Generally, we say, do the mitzvahs not because you're being protected. Do it because Hashem told you to do it. But specifically when it comes to mezuzahs and tefillin as well, the Eibusher tells us these are things that I'm telling you, do it to be protected. In addition to that, I'll tell you one more thing. Not just put up and not just check, but you also make sure that the mezuzahs are put on the doors in the right place on the door. Because you can put it on, and as we'll learn, there's different places to put mezuzahs. We'll get to the mitzvah mezuzah. But regarding tefillin, that's the point. And yichavin ba'anochas tefillin. What do you have to keep in mind when you put on tefillin? So what do you have to keep in mind? I'm doing a mitzvah. What else do I need to keep in mind? But there is a specific kavanah, a specific intent that one has to have when he puts on tefillin. And what is that kavanah? Shetzivonu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Hashem commanded us, lichtiv arba parshis elu, that Hashem commanded us to write the 4 parshas, the 4 portions of the Torah that are placed into the tefillin, and sheyesh bohen yichud shmoi, that in it talks about the unity of Hashem, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So it talks about the unity of Hashem. V'yitzias Mitzrayim. It also talks about us being taken out of Mitzrayim. Kidei, and the purpose being Kidei shenisker nisim v'nifloi she'aso imanu, so that we remember the miracles that Hashem did with us. Shehei moedem al yichudi, that relates to, that represents the concept of the unity of Hashem, that Hashem is united with every part of the world, and Hashem is obviously in control of every part of the world. And to do a miracle isn't something unusual. This is what Hashem is not limited by the natural. For Hashem to do miracles, that's just as easy for Hashem to do the natural. One is as simple as the other. And the idea of Yichud Hashem, meaning that Hashem is united with every part of the world, with the miraculous aspects, with the limited aspects, in every possible way, and we need to connect with Hashem in every way. And Hashem, we have to keep in mind that Hashem has the ability, the koyach, Hashem can do whatever he wants. So you take a look at what's going on in Israel, and obviously everybody's talking about how did the intelligence go wrong. Anybody that says that is really going against his bitachon and amunah in Hashem. You want to ask a question why Hashem did it? You don't know. I don't know. Nobody knows. But why the intelligence went wrong? That if you say that, that's where we're saying we don't believe in Hashem. So because what we have to believe, we have to recognize is that Hashem can do whatever he wants. And he commanded us to put it on our arm next to our heart, and on our head next to our brain, that we should dedicate and devote our neshamas, that's in the brain of the person, and also the desires of our heart, and the thoughts of our heart, we should dedicate them to the service of Hashem. Because when you put on tefillin, you remember Hashem, both in your mind and in your heart, and then you'll recognize that you need to do not so much what you want to do, but what Hashem wants all of us to do.
Well, back to what you're saying, still look at, I believe, what we should have done all we have, we still live in that world. We have to fix things and deal with things that are wrong.
We have to do what we have to do, no question. But at the same time, in the end, what we have to always remember, this is Hashem doing it. Why he did it, we can complain. But that's, I'll give you a perfect example of that. The perfect example is when Moshe Rabbeinu went to Paroi, and Moshe Rabbeinu saw what's going on, and he saw that things were getting. Hashem sends him to take Yidden out of Mitzrayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu sees that in spite of what he's doing, he's not making it any easier; he's making it more difficult. But yet, he does exactly what Hashem tells him to do, because that's what Hashem told him to do. What happens after that? It says Moshe Rabbeinu goes out of Mitzrayim. He raises his hands to Hashem and says, Eibishter, why have you done this to the Jewish people? But that didn't in any way, in spite of the fact that he knew he had a complaint, Eibishter told him to do it. He knew this is what Eibishter is doing. This is what the Eibishter wants. Why? Moshe Rabbeinu asked. And Moshe Rabbeinu himself said, this is not something that I can comprehend. But in spite of the challenges, the difficulties, and the lack of us understanding, and obviously a situation like this, we don't understand. We can't possibly relate to that. And if anybody begins to, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't go to the Jews of Mitzrayim and say, hey guys, stop fighting and then everything will be fine. Moshe Rabbeinu turns around to Hashem and says, Hashem, why did you do these things to Bnei Yisrael? So we know that the perspective of a Jewish leader is, and the way a Jewish leader teaches us to do, is Hashem tells us to do something, you do it. You understand? Great. You don't understand? You do it anyway. Can you complain to Hashem? Of course you can complain, but it can't affect in any way, chas v'sholem, your ma'aseh ha-mitzvahs, and if anything, as the Eibishter tells us, continue to do mitzvahs in a better way, and that will help you be successful in specific issues. And in this case, specifically in a war, Eibishter tells us, strengthen yourself with the mitzvah of tefillin, with mezuzahs, and things like that. That will help protect us in every possible way.
It's hard to say that something has to come to this happen if they don't check.
It's what?
To say that somebody's asking, how is it that I'll be telling that this happened, doesn't believe in Hashem, is a pretty extreme.
Who said that?
Example.
No, not at all. No. He's having, I said this, it's not a problem at all to turn to Hashem and say, Hashem, why did you do this? It's when you say, because you did this, I'm not going to do something anymore because I can't follow what you're doing because look the way you're messing up. That's when you don't believe in Hashem. If you're complaining to Hashem, why did you do it? Moshe Rabbeinu complained to Hashem. It's when you say, Eibishter, look what you did to me. I'm not doing this anymore. You want me to go to party? Sorry, I'm not going to him anymore. That's where you show that you don't believe in Hashem. But if you complain to Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us that you absolutely can and should. No, you don't have to accept it. You can complain. But you can't, that complaint cannot affect your Ma'aseh HaMitzvah.
I want to take back a little bit.
What's that?
I think Charlie heard the exact same thing. That say that this happened because if we look, why did this happen or not happen, that it's not the thing happen today. So if we look at how he does, that's not the first thing today.
Correct.
Why Hashem asked that. That's ultimately the main thing.
That's correct.
But I also said this stuff to look at how
Right, and I responded to you too. Because Hashem told us to look at Teva, that we have to do what we need to do. Having done that, we can't now go back and say, you know what, we messed up. No, we didn't mess up. We have to go, next time around, you want to do something different, that's great. The question, though, that we ought to be asking ourselves, why in the end did Hashem make this happen? Not so-and-so messed up, and that's why it happened.
The first thing to do is that's the main thing.
That is true. We have to do tshuva. You fast for myself and do tshuva. Do tshuva meaning not do tshuva in start because you're lacking something. You're lacking something not because you didn't go to the tshuva meaning that you picked the wrong doctor.
Tshuva that happened on Torah, the event that started on Yom Kippur, was such Vegas and everything. This party was fighting, and this party was fighting. So the advantage of this place was that both sides came together and had options. Well, it's interesting, but the sin you could say was the Vegas, and then
never can we say blame another person. For like the Rabbi used the expression, Hashem doesn't need us to be his attorney.
I know that, but we examine our deeds.
First, we can examine our own personal deeds, not somebody else's deeds.
Where we are not getting along with each other.
So we have to examine our own personal deeds and do what we can. And we can do that. If we can affect somebody else, go for it. But never should we ever say, Eibishter, I know why you did such and such because so and so did such and such. But unfortunately, there are plenty of people that take that perspective, both for the Holocaust and for any terrible thing that occurs. I know why it happened because so and so was talking in the middle of shul. I mean, that's a disaster to say.
But isn't that being a knock, basically? The Jewish people went against what Hashem said to do. Hashem came with an enemy of some sort, and then they did tshuva, and then Hashem rescued them. Then we ate.
No, that's only for a Navi who has direct discussion with the Eibishter that this is what you should tell Bnei Yisrael. That's where that's possible. Again, the lesson is that for us as individuals, the lesson is not that we should become Nevi'im. The lesson is for us as individuals that we yifashvish b'maisav. And as the Rambam says, that if a person looks at a particular occurrence and says, Mikra, it happened because of something, so the Rambam says that person is an agzor. That's the expression that Rabbi uses, that if somebody says that after something occurs, that it nikra, those are the kinds of things that happen in the world because there's whatever the reason is, and doesn't look at it. This is what the Eibishter did for whatever reason that the Eibishter wants that we don't know. If a person says it, that it's because somebody did something, that it's a nikra, it happened because of whatever, in other words, not because of Hashem. The Rambam says a person like that is an Avzor. What does it mean? What do we have to do? We have to personally look at what we need to correct. We don't have to look at what that person needs to correct. Because again, we don't have to look to say that, Eibishter, I know why you did this, because that guy out there is stealing, and that's why you're doing this to us. That a person like that.
Look at something, it's a simple thing, like Jewish people told you were together, you were strong, and you're divided, you're weak. And you can take a look at sticks and say you're separate, you're broken. So when you see that happening in your world, and you look at the Holy Land of Israel, you're saying we have to close our eyes and say, why is like think about this fight. But the point I wanted to bring out, and focus on it, is that you can look at that as a double rule, it's a spiritual thing we're fighting in that cause. Let's listen to the general was being interviewed, and he says the reason why what happened were when they got in planes and they got in is because they're so busy focusing on each other and all their ladies that they didn't have pay attention to any of these other things. You can see that's
no, but the truth is, it is a ruchnistic thing, and that's the way we ought to look at everything like that. Unfortunately, we are people that have our own minds, our own thoughts, our own feelings, so we often bring that into the picture. But the Rebbe didn't look at it. The Rebbe, each one of us has our challenges, and we don't look at it that way. The Rebbe looked at it clearly that this is something the Eibishter wanted it to happen. Why? I don't know. And the only time I'll know is when Mashiach comes. And in spite of the fact that there were, like I say, great Gedolei Yisrael that said the Holocaust occurred because Yidden were not doing mitzvahs and because Yidden were doing who knows what, because of the reform movement or whatever. Whenever the Rebbe heard something like that, the Rebbe was adamantly opposed. I remember the Rebbe yelling at people that said things like that. And if anyone, the Rebbe can certainly pick and relate to whatever the issue happens to be. But the Rebbe says, that is not our job. We can't do that. Why the Eibishter did it, we don't know. Can we complain? Certainly. And I've heard more than once the Rebbe, when things occurred, and the Rebbe complained, and the Rebbe even said once, I'm going to stop speaking because if I continue to speak, I might say something I'll regret that I've said. I remember this, when a particular person, I remember when somebody was killed in Crown Heights, and the Rebbe was so, very uptight about it and upset about it, and was speaking and then complaining to the Eibishter, and then the Rebbe said, you know what, I better stop because I might say something I'm going to regret. But the point of it was, we don't know. And as the Rebbe actually wrote to the first president of Eretz Yisrael, that from the time that he was in Cheder, a little child, the Pasuk says, Oitcha Hashem ki anafta bi, that when Mashiach comes, Oitcha Hashem, I will praise Hashem ki anafta bi, that you let me go, that you abandoned me. And the Rebbe said, I never could understand that. Mashiach, we're going to thank Hashem for abandoning us. How's that even possible? But it says when Mashiach comes, that's what's going to happen. So the Rebbe wrote to this president of Eretz Yisrael that from the time I was a child, I couldn't wait for Mashiach just to understand that. How can we possibly be grateful to Hashem for abandoning us?
One more.